Hey, good morning. Happy Monday. We get another week to continue building the lives and the careers that we desire. If you were celebrating Easter this past weekend, I hope you had an amazing Easter weekend. And if you were not celebrating Easter, then I hope you still had an amazing weekend. I'm excited for this video because what we're going to talk about is optionality and what I believe is, the options fallacy, or the belief that more is better. And most people have this belief. And so in this video, I want to kind of chunk it into three pieces. So the first part is talking about what is the options fallacy and why do a lot of people believe that the more options that they have, the better. Why is that so commonly believed? And then the middle part is I want to break down what are some consequences long-term that are a direct result of not being able to make focused decisions, and rather, a lot of people are afraid to give up options. There's a cost to that. And so that middle part, we're going to talk about that cost. And then the third part is what do some of the most successful people in the world believe? And the way that I love to think about things is who has the result that I want, or who has the result that we want, and how did they get there? What are their beliefs? What actions did they take? What decisions did they make? How have they tangibly and mentally achieved their success and learn from them? A lot of people just commonly believe everything around them. And if you've been watching these videos, one underlying theme that you're probably starting to get from these videos is if we believe and we decide and we act and we do exactly as everyone else around us, well, then we're going to get the exact same results. And so what we need to start asking ourselves is, why do I believe what I believe? Why am I doing what I'm doing? How am I making decisions? And is there a strict rationality beneath making those decisions? Most people believe that they need to keep all their doors open and continue building the resume, but the question is why? And where does that belief come from? So in this video, we're going to break down those three pieces, and most importantly is what do the most successful people believe? And let's dive in. All right, so let's start by talking about what is the options fallacy and why do so many people believe that more is better. So when I think about a fallacy is a generally accepted belief or a general belief that is not necessarily true, or maybe the opposite is true. And so this belief that more is better is a common belief held by most people. And it's, you've probably heard of resume building, or I need to do this in order to build my resume. And the reason I want a strong resume is so that I have more options. So there's kind of two main reasons why so many people believe that they need to keep building the resume with either a higher level of education or more certifications, or they need to go to a certain company and do a certain type of role in order to build the resume so that they have more options. So I think the first reason, or where this first comes from, is growing up K through 12, and then if we do go to college, well, then it's the exact same in college, but we're constantly competing for options. So we grow up competing in sports and academics, in social circles, for literally everything. We're always competing. And then it's going to be the top 5, 10, 20% or so that are going to have, the best options. And then there's going to be the middle tier options, then whatever's left over. So that's kind of, we grow up competing. And then those options are going to, ultimately determine where we go to college, the scholarships that we get, and the opportunities. So then we get to college and we continue competing. We compete in grades, we compete for leadership positions, we compete for internships, and then ultimately that's going to determine the beginning of our career. But where this structure breaks down is once you're actually out in the workforce, we graduate, we're taking in the first position, and then we have the 1 to 2 years. Well, in the first 2 years out of college, it's you're launching your career, and you're starting off with certain skills, certain knowledge sets, certain experiences, and those are going to heavily influence. Think of those as the initial conditions. That's going to heavily influence the direction that your career takes thereafter. And so where that breaks down, though, is unless your goal is to continue moving up the corporate ladder that you're currently on, if that is your goal, then you can keep playing that same system. Compete, internal corporate politics, building relationships, outperformance, early raises, early promotions, etc., and you keep moving up. So if that is the only goal, then that process continues working. But where it breaks down is when that's not your goal. And then you get stuck with the idea of, well, what do I want to do? And that's really the second main reason. So the first main reason is a competitive upbringing and the constant searching for more options, for better options. But then the second reason is a lot of people, because they don't know what they want for their lives and their careers, they're unable to make long-term decisions. And when I think of long-term, I'm not talking 3 months or 6 months. I'm thinking, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. If we don't know what we want long-term, we cannot make long-term decisions that eliminates short-term attractive opportunities. And that is where most people believe, I need more options, I need more options. It's because they're focused on short-term attractive opportunities. They're constantly focused on where am I today and what is slightly better. Slightly better money, slightly better responsibility, a slightly better job title. And so when we don't know what we want, we cannot make long-term decisions that eliminate the distraction and the slightly better short-term attractive opportunities. So what we need to do is we need to have that long-term mindset. We need to be able to make long-term decisions. But that's, I'm pretty sure I've talked about that in a separate video. So now the second part I want to talk about is what are the consequences of having this consistent option hunting mentality of constantly trying to keep building the resume. So I've listed out 8 different long-term consequences that I believe are a result of constantly option hunting and being believing in this options fallacy that more is better. So the first one I want to talk about is weaker commitment, discipline, and performance. Now, what I mean by this is when we're constantly seeking more options, and it's kind of like you always have one eye turned outwards, and you're always focused partially on what else is out there. And so because of that, you never have a full 100% commitment to what it is that you're trying to do. And it becomes very difficult to focus on one thing for a long time because you're not fully committed and you're open to potentially pursuing and chasing other options. And that also deteriorates the second part of that, which is discipline. So weaker commitment, discipline, and performance. So if you don't have that full 100% commitment and attention to what it is that you're trying to achieve, discipline begins to break down because as you're tempted by these other things, well, maybe the discipline slips. Maybe you start doing something else or paying more attention or over investing elsewhere. And then ultimately that's going to degrade the performance because if you don't have 100% commitment and discipline and you're not doing what you need to do, performance begins to slip. And that also then leads into the second piece, which is a weaker focus. So we're easily distracted and tempted. Now, and I'm sure that you've probably seen this, especially in your careers, if you were performing very well and you're well regarded within the industry or within the company, and let's say that you have your personal branding materials on, they look great, your LinkedIn, resume, etc. Well, you might have either in-network connections, so people who know you, or you might have recruiters reaching out to you just through the LinkedIn profile or, through some other means. And if you don't necessarily know what you want, but you know that you love options and you want more options and you want to figure out what's out there, again, because you don't know what you want, well, you're going to be constantly bombarded with more opportunities. And in order to evaluate an opportunity, you need to invest time, attention, effort, and sometimes even resources into exploring the opportunity. All of that investment is investment that's not being invested into a long-term goal. And it's kind of like taking all of your resources and shooting it out in many different directions, as opposed to channeling and focusing everything into one long-term, deeply desired path, whether that's your personal life, your professional career, any other means. So you're tempted very easily when you're constantly seeking new options, which again spreads you out too thin. So the third point is weaker growth and excellence. So again, if you're investing resources and energy all over the place and you're constantly evaluating new opportunities and you're not 100% committed and disciplined and focused, you're not going to perform at the highest level. And you're also not going to be developing and learning new skills, knowledge, and experiences at the same pace as you would if you were 100% committed to what it is that you were doing and constantly focused and performing on that. So for a lot of people, when they're all over the place in terms of option hunting and constantly just trying to build prestige and build that resume, well, they might not necessarily be compounding themselves. they might be learning this and learning this and learning this and, these 2 or 3 separate things. But once they actually figure out what they want to do, and let's say that's sometime later on down the road, maybe only one of these is actually relevant. And so there's a lot of wasted growth and self-development and of skills and of knowledge that may not even be worthwhile long term. Now, I always believe that learning and self-development is worthwhile. But the question is in what priority? Because a lot of people, they're learning all sorts of different things. But because there's no application of the thing that they're learning, it's kind of like a shotgun effect of learning. And they might learn something and then not apply it, and so they forget it. And then 6 months later or 3 years later, maybe at that time it's relevant. Well, now they've already forgotten everything. They actually need to double invest in that personal development in order to learn and then eventually apply it. So when we're constantly option hunting, our compounding growth of our skills, our knowledge, our experiences, and ultimately our creativity, that gets blown apart. And so we need to have that focus in order to compound ourselves professionally in our value. All right, so now we have the fourth part. So impatience and uncertainty, outcompeted in the long term. Now, when we don't have that sense of deep commitment to what it is that we're trying to do because we know it's what we want, when we're constantly seeking other opportunities and we're evaluating other opportunities, well, we become uncertain because we're not sure what we want to do long term. And we also become very impatient because we can't see the future. We have not envisioned the future. And because we can't envision it, we want to make decisions now, today, whatever seems like the best option. And so you'll spend a lot of time looking at options and then ultimately choosing one. But maybe a year later or 2 years later, or sometimes even sooner, like 6 months later, that same feeling of uncertainty and impatience comes to you where it's like, is there something better? I have a feeling there's something better out there. So then you go right back into the same process of uncertainty, impatience, and searching for that next best option because you have not defined what you actually want. So then the fifth part is easily influenced and swayed from your path and goals. And this, again, it goes with the other points, but imagine that you do take one option. Well, if you're an option hunter, you're going to keep everything open and constantly seek out new options, which again means that if something is slightly better, it's going to hook you. And then the moment it hooks you, you know that your path is going to change one more time. Every single time the path changes, it's kind of like restarting an iteration. And the growth slows, performance is going to slow, and you're constantly restarting at 60 to 80%. You never lose everything. And if anyone ever says, oh, you're restarting, you're never fully restarting. You always transfer your skills, your knowledge, your experiences, your personality, your mindset, your beliefs, everything into the next position. But the fewer transitions you have to make, the faster you're going to grow and compound. And so a lot of people, if they don't have that sense of certainty, they're going to easily be pulled off track into something new that maybe that's not necessarily what they want long term. So we need to be able to not be swayed or influenced easily. So now the sixth point is thought and decision fatigue, both in the short term and in the long term. Now, if you've ever had it where you go to a restaurant with friends or family and you're given the menu, and on the menu there are 50 different options for what you could possibly eat. How long does it take everyone at the table to ultimately decide what they want to eat? It's usually kind of long, like 5, 10, 15 minutes. And then there's always that one person who takes ridiculously too long and they just say, I don't know what I want. And then they make the decision at the last second. So the more options there are, the more taxing it is on our mind. It's literally draining mentally to have to make decisions. And so in the short term, whether you want to consider that, within an hour or within a day or even within a week or a month, it's short term. We're constantly having to make decisions, which breaks us down. It's tiring. And we're always second guessing ourselves. And we'll talk about that in a second as point 7. But when we're always second guessing ourselves, we're always trying to, again, evaluate. Evaluation takes a lot of time and energy, which is very draining. Now, even more so is in the long term. So we are drained long term if we're trying to set out on a long-term path and we're constantly evaluating whether or not we're on track. Are we doing the right thing? Should I be doing something else? Should I be going here? Should I be going in that direction? It's both in the short term and the long term to get yourself to maintain that consistent energy level in order to get to where you want to go and achieve something great in the long term. We need to store and channel that energy very efficiently. And when we're constantly option hunting, again, it's physically and mentally draining in order to constantly evaluate. Now, all of these points, 1 through 6 so far, kind of total up and bring us to the 7th point. Now, the 7th point is we have a weaker self-confidence, a weaker sense of self-belief when we're constantly evaluating new opportunities because we don't necessarily believe that we've made the right choice. And we're always uncertain of ourselves, of our decisions, of whether or not we're heading in the right direction. It brings back that uncertainty. And when we feel uncertain about ourselves, about the decisions that we make, it breaks down self-confidence. And self-confidence affects every area of our life, both personally and professionally. And so we cannot allow that to happen because that's going to stop us from going and taking leadership opportunities, from presenting new or creative ideas that might be extremely valuable for the team or for the company. It might stop us from taking a little bit of risk and doing something that we know long-term is what we need to do. But in the short term, we're not exactly sure how it'll turn out. Well, if we have a lower or a decreased self-doubt because we constantly doubt ourselves and we're not sure whether or not we're making the right decisions, that not only is going to, shorten our decision-making timeframes in the short term, because again, we're impatient. We're going to take whatever the best available opportunity is, but that's going to deeply negative affect us long-term in terms of our personal growth, opportunities, success, building value, wealth, relationships, literally every aspect of our lives and our careers. And so now that 1 through 7, all that totals up into the 8th final point. And this is more of a statement rather than a consequence. But in terms of a statement, it's that the world is creating and shaping you rather than you creating yourself and shaping the world. So I want to read that again because when we are constantly seeking new options, we're never fully certain in what it is that we're trying to do long term. What that means is the world is creating and shaping you rather than you creating yourself and shaping the world. And so we want to be able to know what we want, why we want it, have an idea of how we first initially plan to get there, and then continue iterating and improving the strategy long term. But we need to create ourselves and shape the world. That is how we want to build our lives and our careers. So those 8 points, those are what I believe are the long-term consequences of constantly seeking new options and just trying to build the resume and keep as many doors open as possible. So, but those are just my beliefs. And now what I want to do is share with you several, paragraphs of thoughts that I found from some of the world's best. Many of the names, or actually all these names, you'll likely recognize. But I want to start with Steve Jobs. So here's a quote that he shared with shareholders during one of his presentations. And he said that people think focus means saying yes to the thing you've got to focus on. But that's not what it means at all. It means saying no to the 100 other good ideas that there are. You have to pick carefully. I'm actually as proud of the things we have not done as the things we have done. Innovation is saying no to 1,000 things. And if you're familiar with the turnaround story where, Steve Jobs got kicked out of Apple, he left, he started Pixar, crushed Pixar, and then ultimately got pulled back into Apple. When he came back into Apple, Apple was not doing well, and they were actually on the verge of bankruptcy with limited cash. And what Steve Jobs immediately did was he went in and eliminated probably 80 to 90% of all the different things that they were trying to offer. And he limited it down to a very specific core line of products. Well, that was why Apple was able to kind of revitalize, and now Apple is what it is today. It wasn't through exploring all the potential product options possible. It wasn't serving as many options to the market as possible. It was focusing, knowing what their expertise is, and being the best at it. All right, so now a quote from Warren Buffett. So the difference between successful people and really successful people is that really successful people say no to almost everything. So eliminating a lot of options in order to focus and achieve excellence and progress in what it is that you actually want to do. All right, so now we have a quote here from Jeff Bezos. So vision is absolutely important, but it doesn't deserve your day-to-day attention. You need a vision then, but that becomes a touchstone. It's something you can always come back to if you ever get confused, but mostly your time should be spent on things that are happening today, this year, and maybe in the next 2 or 3 years. So I would always encourage people to hold powerfully to a vision and be stubborn of it. And don't let anybody move you off of your vision. So if I had to kind of summarize that, it's know exactly what you want long term and be willing to do anything in order to achieve it. And you need to focus and work today, but it's kind of, you know where you're headed. You focus on today most of the time, but every now and then you pick your head up. You remind yourself, all right, this is where I'm going. And then you put your head down and you keep working. But notice your head's only in 2 positions. It comes up to look at the vision, and then the other majority of the time it's working. Well, if you're evaluating options, now your head's in all the other directions and it's not in those 2 directions. All right, so then we have a quote from, and this is kind of a mixed quote by Alicia Keys and Oprah. So, I would be so overwhelmed and overworked. I was just saying yes to everything, and then I'd be exhausted. And there's no joy. It steals your joy. That was a big lesson that Miss Oprah shared with me. She said she had also experienced that, and how she was also or always looking outside of herself for the answer. And she finally realized that she's the only one who knows herself, and we're the only ones who truly know what's good for us. Only us. You know what a resounding yes feels like. I didn't understand that you could say no. So that was Alicia Keys explaining in an interview how she had learned how to finally say no to all the different opportunities around her, and she learned that from Oprah. And Oprah pretty much had said, look, I'd gone through the exact same experience. With their success comes an infinite number of opportunities. They need to be able to say no to an enormous amount of opportunities in order to focus and channel and become excellent at what it is that they want to be excellent at. All right, so now a final quote here is by Elon Musk. So, are CEOs in corporate America focused enough on product improvement? I think the answer is no. Spend less time on finance, less time in conference rooms, less time on PowerPoint, and more time just trying to make your product as amazing as possible. And I love that quote so much because it's when we think of a lot of corporate America and really just a lot of the marketplace, it's based on trying to impress other people. And when you're just trying to impress other people and search for slightly better options everywhere, there's no full commitment or focus on one specific thing that is the primary value generator. And so what he's saying there is a lot of, the CEOs, the leaders of companies, of these either multi-billion or even small to medium-sized businesses, their minds are so scattered in every different direction, trying to please everyone and really pursue every single opportunity, that there's a lot of CEOs, well, at least this is kind of what Elon's saying, and I'm paraphrasing here, but they're not doing their job. Or they're not doing their job as well as they could be. So all of these different perspectives, again, are based on focus. And these are people who are arguably the best at what they do in the world, and many of them in history. And the underlying theme here is be willing to say no in order to say yes to what it is that you actually want. And a lot of people will spend most of their lives and careers option hunting, constantly seeking for something slightly better than they have right now, but it may not be actually what they want, and they're just going to end up, pursuing another option or making another change later on down the road. So a final point that I want to share with you here is for every investment, we want a return on that investment. Now, there's a lot of people that will make decisions, whether it's a specific type of education program or a certification or to go to a certain type of company or to do a certain type of position. It's in all of those decisions, we need to ask ourselves, is this decision going to get or yield me a return that is going to pay off in the long term? Is it going to get me to where I want to be in the long term? If we have not defined this, then every single investment that we're making, we're totally uncertain about what the return is going to be, because that return is dependent on the outcome or the application of whatever it is that we just invested in. So we need to know what we want long term, and we also, the fewer options that we look at, the more focus, the more time, the more investment we can channel into what it is that's deeply important to us and what the true underlying value generator is in our careers and our lives. So I'm going to finish this video with just a simple question for you. Have you been chasing options, or have you been chasing what you want? And that's food for thought. So if you like this video, please give it a like, please give it a subscribe. I come out with these videos every single Monday. Thanks so much for your time in watching this, and I look forward to seeing you next Monday.